There we go. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the lab. This is where we talk all things IFL and do our weekly rundown of the week that was and the week that is to come and all the other great goings on in this great league. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. It is about 8 p.m. over here on the East Coast, 5 p.m. for the left coasters in the audience. And it is with great pleasure that I loudly announce once again that it is Wager Wednesday in the Indoor Football League. My name is Alex Schuberth. I am a lead IFL contributor over for a sports forum site called Sports Coast to Coast. They are a Pacific Northwest based sports forum site which specializes in the coverage of the Indoor Football League and its 14 currently active member teams specifically. We have up-to-date team rosters, updates therein. We have game previews, recaps, and a whole bunch of other analysis. Some really great original content out there for anybody looking to up their fandom with the league or perhaps a specific team that you're rooting for. So definitely go check it out if you haven't done so already. I put the URL at the bottom of the description, where there you will also find a written version of this post that I put out there late last night. So without a further ado, let's talk. It is week 8 of the 2025 season. We are quickly chugging along here as we approach the midsection of the season. We're starting to see teams rise and fall with a lot of surprises, especially true with this past week in the IFL. So let's dive in at what we ended up seeing there. So week 7 had 6 games on the calendar, and all of them had some amazing storyline that was worth discussing in reflection. We had one team stay perfect, both on the spread and straight up. We had another team drop a decision in their quest to stay perfect, despite having a 15-point lead in the fourth quarter. So we'll be going over those game-by-game highlights momentarily. Our bets wound up going even for the week with a bunch of great luck and a bunch of buzzer luck scattered in between, creating a little bit of balance there. We will add those results to our year-to-date tracker and try to identify if there's any trends that are still out there worth pursuing with future picks. So we'll look at the bet type specifically, the team specifically, and see how those have evolved in 2025 compared to what those teams were performing at for the 2024 season. We'll also look at some perfect streaks that are still alive. There are 4 of them. So stick around to see exactly what those are. Once we do all of our recap and reflection, we'll dive right into the big board, go into week 8, where we have another 6-pack waiting for us to digest. 5 games Saturday, 1 game Sunday, and we will try for a redemptive 3-leg parlay cook-up once we make our single game picks. So week 7 started out pretty well for us, especially with that first game on the schedule between the Quad City Steamwheelers and the Fishers Freight. The Steamwheelers riding a perfect record into the heart of Indiana, and the Freight trying to respond off a 3-game losing streak. And this game was simply electric. Both teams made runs throughout the game, and it looked like for a moment that Fishers was going to be the first team to deal Quad City a loss. They were up by 7 late. Quad City did have one final chance to possess the ball in regulation. It was touchdown or bust, and ultimately they did find the score. They got the touchdown, decided on the extra point to force overtime, and the Steamwheelers ended up getting that first possession of the overtime. Quick 20-yard touchdown pass to Jordan Vesey from Daquan Neal. And the Steamwheeler defense, it's been good all season. No better example of that than their overtime possession going up against Jaya Wright and that Fisher's offense. On 4th and goal from the 3, that Steam Wheeler front line got to Wright, sacked him, and that was all that she wrote. In the end, the Steam Wheelers win it 55-48. Significant for us because that margin of victory was 7 points, which you don't often get in the overtime frame. Usually those margins of victory are around either 3 or 6 points, primarily born from the overtime rules that are built in. So by far, this was our luckiest winning bet of the season. And when all is said and done, it might still hold up as such. So we talk about good, bad luck all the time. So it's fair that we acknowledge that was luck. No two ways around it. So Quad City stays perfect. Fishers drops to 2-4 with that 55-48 decision. In Duval, we had the Sharks hosting the Iowa Barnstormers. And Iowa was coming off a big win. 31-point victory at home against the Fishers Freight the week before. So they were going in with a little bit of confidence. And the Sharks were not having any of it. Not one bit. It was a turnover fest in that first half for Iowa. Multiple interceptions from James Cahoon, who looked to be just off with his timing and his decision-making throughout the game. At least in the first half when the Sharks got out to a 25-0 lead. Iowa was able to pick it up a little bit in the second half, though that's not setting the bar particularly high off a 0-point first half. But it was really the first 30 minutes here that set the tone for the Sharks. It was a big bounce-back game, especially for Caleb Barker and the defense, getting back to more of the form that they saw with their first few wins of the season, to the tune of a 53-22 win. That added up to 75 points, which stayed under the total that we had predicted. So we got our week started with a nice couple wins on the docket. And then we had Green Bay and Tulsa. Very entertaining contest, highly anticipated going in. A lot of people, including myself, were proclaiming this as potential game of the year potential, especially where this was the sequel to that 74-68 instant classic at the Resch Center that these two teams played in just a few weeks prior. This game didn't exactly follow that same script, particularly for the Green Bay Blizzard, who had uncharacteristic trouble finishing off drives. And to Tulsa's credit, as they've done for a couple games now, they were red hot on offense to start the game, really setting the tone. They got up 26-3 at halftime and simply did not look back. Really, really good games from the Oilers on both sides of the ball. TJ Edwards has that offense looking spectacular. The defense playing its way into becoming a top 5 team. The Oilers are looking scary, friends. And that 46-30 victory over the Green Bay Blizzard is one heck of a way to proclaim that. Unfortunately, we took the Blizzard on the money line, and we ended up failing on this pick'em this time around. So it's on to the next there. In Henderson, the Northern Arizona Wranglers continuing their road stretch against the Nighthawk team coming off that win over San Antonio prior to their bye week. This was their first game since that off date, and they looked refreshed. Naz played a pretty good game, in all honesty, probably their best of the season, especially on offense, where they made the switch from CJ Fowler to Caleb Lowe. And the end result was the first 30-plus point game outing of the season for Northern Arizona. Unfortunately for them, it wasn't quite enough, as Vegas went with a unique strategy for this game. They started Jaden DeLaura, 22 first-half points, then went to Jerome Johnson, who chipped in 21 in the second half. And we ended up with a closer game than a lot of people were probably expecting, at least by the box score. Vegas pulling it out 43-37. Maybe not the prettiest win in the world, but it is a win nonetheless. Nighthawks stay at third in the division at 3-2, while Naz falls to 0-5 as the league's only winless team to this point. The next game was the stunner. Spoiler alert. The Wranglers heading to Tucson, short drive down the road to face the Sugar Skulls, a game where Arizona entered as 11.5-point favorites. And although it didn't quite look like peak Rattlers through the first 3 quarters of this one, they still carried a 15-point lead into the final frame. And we've seen a bunch of these games involving the Rattler shakeout where they have the lead like this and they're just able to kind of stay the course. They either maybe win by 7, 8, 9 points, or they run away with it in the fourth quarter. But this game, incredibly unique. For one, Tucson's defense came to life in the fourth quarter. Unlike their collapse in the fourth quarter a couple weeks ago against San Diego, they held Arizona completely scoreless. And that helped fuel a furious comeback in that last 15 minutes that ended up resulting in them having a chance at a game-winning field goal from Kevin Macias, who was able to play the hero and bang that ball right through the uprights. And just for good measure, with 1 second left, Arizona tried to get a miraculous lateral play, pitchy woo-woo, whatever you want to call it, and it ended up disastrously for the visitors. The Sugar Skulls took it home for the touchdown to add to the margin of victory there. So Tucson continues to occasionally be the bane of my existence. They send my moneyline betting record to 0-7 when picking favorites, which we'll get to that in a bit, but you can sense where I'm at mentally with that. But this game, 42-35, Rattlers fall for the first time. They go to 4-1. Tucson at 2-3, suddenly with new life, trying to make some noise in that Western Conference playoff hunt. And our final game of the week took place on Sunday, Battle of California Edition 2, with the San Diego Strike Force and the Bay Area Panthers, a matchup that, true to form, was every bit as close as advertised right up until midway through the third quarter. The Strike Force had played reasonably well up to that point, actually leading the game by 2 points. But then suddenly the Panthers' offense and defense and special teams all came to life, factoring in the offense was lightning fast, quick strike. Defense got multiple takeaways and interceptions off Nate Davis, and that special teams unit, that kickoff coverage, contributing with a recovered kickoff in the end zone for yet again another score. It was a furious point-scoring blitz in the second half of that game, particularly from the Panthers, who found 42 in the game's final 30. And what we ended up with was the second consecutive time that Bay Area has beaten San Diego at home by 23. This final score was 57-34. It wound up being a touchdown more than the 85.5 that we had set to try to stay below. So unfortunately for us, we ended with a really tough end of Saturday window, and Sunday's loss kind of brought things right back to even for us. So that is how the week went. We see some of our betting type records down below. We're pretty good on the spread. We're spectacular with the over-under. That money line, though, is something that has to get fixed going forward. And eventually more of these favorites will have to win. This voodoo has to stop eventually. So that is the hope heading into week 8 and beyond. Our parlay attempt was no different in terms of getting victimized by that late Saturday window. We got Jacksonville to cover. We got Arizona and Tucson to cover. Or excuse me, we had Arizona, Tucson staying under. I'm not sure why it says San Diego Bay Area there, but that should be Arizona, Tucson with the under at 83 or 84, something like that. But point is, we got decked by Vegas minus 10.5, falling victim to the backdoor cover. The Northern Arizona Wranglers were down by 13 with about 30 seconds left, with an opportunity for one last score to try to save face. They barely were able to get home a rushing touchdown with about 23 seconds left on the clock. And that pretty much was all she wrote for that parlay attempt. So it goes down to as 2 of 3. We fall one leg short. But our per leg record is still incredible. 16 wins compared to 5 losses. That is a really nice way to consistently construct some winning parlays. So we'll look to keep that going as well. I'm sure we will find some more winners here down the line, maybe as soon as this week. We'll see. Our year-to-date net gain, net loss, it's lagging behind right now. We've had a couple of weeks that have gone below 500 compared to just 2 weeks that have gone above 500. Everything else has been right at that middle line. So it's going to take that spike week for us to get back to net gain at this point. Again, our goal is to try to get to $60 worth of net gain by the end of the season, which is going to take quite a bit of a streak here. So we've got our work cut out for us, but last year we went on that crazy run. I have no reason to think that we're not able to repeat that effort going forward. Year-to-date return on investment percentage, even though we were a little bit below net gain last week, because we had started with the flat method at a negative percentage that eventually gravitates closer to 0. But again, we want to be above that in a pretty quick order here. And now this updated graphic is basically what happens if you take each of my 7 money line picks that failed and went with the opposite direction. Start with $10, roll it over from my week 2 Massachusetts pick to my week 7 Arizona pick, go everything the opposite. You would have currently over $7,500 by fading every single one. Now, bear in mind, we've only had 12 upsets all season from betting underdogs. And somehow, some way, we have been on the wrong end of over half of those. If you take the odds of picking a game where the underdog won, getting 7 consecutive underdogs is 1 out of 2,187 roughly, if you were to do it from an independent standpoint. If you take each game from the sample and kind of take it out in preparation for the next one and do it that way, you're looking at 1 in over 10,000 instances. Like, I could not do this again if I tried to do it. It's a crazy streak, and I calculated the numbers again. I'll give you a hint that one of my picks coming up is a favorite. So we will see exactly what that number turns into if my pick once again goes south. It'll be a fun little exercise to venture into. So here are our population of results so far for each bet type, kind of segmented out. Favorites have been very, very good in the past couple weeks. It has been very chalky, except, of course, in the instances where I picked the favorite to win outright. With favorites covering now at about 57% of the time compared to 43% for the underdogs. This was a little bit to be expected, at least in the short term, particularly with how few double-digit spreads that we've had so far this season. I don't think we had any in the first 5-6 weeks, right up until that Naz Arizona game where, come on, you were going to have to put that at double digits to some degree. But yep. So favorites are winning outright, right about where they have historically converted at in each of the past 3 years. back 2 weeks ago, that underdog conversion rate was 40%. So a little bit of a rough time for them amidst all the chalk from weeks 6 and 7. But that real value there, that 23 and 14 games going under. And that percentage really takes an uptick once you start talking about totals set above 82.5. So is that something amidst all of the new rule changes kind of settling in now as far as direct effect? Is that something we continue to tap into as we go week to week here? Or will there be a point where the overs start to take over? Because we had a bunch of that last year where a week would be 5-1 to the over and the next would be 1-6 to the under. So we will have to see soon enough. All right, here are our team by team trends. We had mentioned right at the top the 4 perfect streaks that are still alive, and they involve 2 teams, one of which is the Northern Arizona Wranglers, who have lost every game on the money line while going under in all 5 of those contests. On the other side, the Quad City Steamwheelers, perfect straight up and against the spread, albeit we know that last one was by absolute divine intervention and pure luck, but it is what it is. So those are some pretty reliable streaks, honestly, as reliable as they can get. Will we venture into potentially picking one of these? Or is now the time that we strike in terms of banking on that first opposite result to come in? And here are our results by week. We remain perfect with our predictions involving the Northern Arizona Wranglers. We also have 5 wins with the Quad City Steamwheelers, who again, in 2024, were our most profitable betting team of the season. So we are continuing the hot stretch there. The teams that are struggling back with just 1 win apiece, San Antonio, San Diego, Massachusetts, and Tulsa, all of those teams will be in action this week. Our hope is that we do wind up getting our second win with as many of those teams as possible, if not all 4. Additionally, we have gone with at least 1 bet type for every single team except for 1. And that's the one highlighted darker in the bottom left corner over there, which is Tulsa Oilers spread bets. We have yet to dip our feet into those waters. So is that something that we do this week or perhaps later in the future? Stick around to find out. Alrighty, now is the time for our disclaimer section. The lines and odds that we're going to be using today are going to come from DraftKings Sportsbook. I should note that FanDuel, for some reason, has stopped offering lines, at least as far as I could say. They have not offered anything since, I believe, either week 5 or 6. So I'm under the impression that it is back to only DraftKings offering lines. But in any event, it's something to work with. They post them every week, so that's what we'll use. This is purely for curiosity and entertainment purposes. I'm not here as a so-called betting expert trying to make money. After all, as we've seen with Arizona Tucson, not to bring up that again, but there's no such thing as a guarantee or a lock in the sports wagering world. If you would like to tail or fade my bets, whatever you want to do, play along that way, you're more than welcome to do so, but please understand you're doing it at your own risk. You must be 21 or older to play in most jurisdictions. And if you do dabble your feet into sports betting, have a game plan, set your budget, stick to it, both time and money, risk only what you can afford to lose. If you or somebody else that you love is having trouble with problem gaming, or maybe something that's teetering along the lines of addiction, there's lots of resources online that even sportsbooks offer for help in that area. Haveagameplan.org is the example that I have down there. That is one of many great resources to consult for assistance there. With all of that said, we've got 6 games on the board this week. Let's dive in and make our picks. Starting with the afternoon window. We have an afternoon window this week in the IFL. At 4:05, we will see a classic rivalry that dates even back as far as the AF2 days, when the Quad City Steamwheelers take on the Green Bay Blizzard for the second time this season. The Blizzard coming back home after 2 straight on the road. They're getting 1.5 from the bookmakers, with the over-under set at 85.5. Quad City is minus 130 money line, and Green Bay is plus 110. This series is spectacular. Never ceasing to offer high-quality moments of entertainment. Not to mention that in this instance, we have an undefeated record once again on the line with Quad City. They were very fortunate to get the execution late that they did against Fishers last week. To come out of that one 55-48 over the Fishers Freight, as that team remains playing probably the best all-around ball of any team this season. Daquan Neal at quarterback, well on his way to another double-digit win season. The defense with Keyshawn Moore, Bubba Arslanian, and Chris Harrell, that's a really solid team that's going to be tough for anybody to beat week in, week out. But Green Bay, we've seen them before in this building. They're no slouch. Take last year's results, for example. They were constantly beating teams down by like 14 to 28 points at Resch Center. So this game is not going to be easy for Quad City. It's not going to be easy for Green Bay either. Should be a really fantastic game either way. What I consulted with the most for this game was the overall series history dating back to when these two teams first did battle as IFL teams. The home and away split was what caught my attention here. Since 2019 or 2018, one of those 2 years, the home team in this series is 10-3 outright. And the Blizzard record all-time against the Steamwheelers at home is 5-1, including last year's postseason win. So from that lens, it's a little surprising that we can get Green Bay at plus money. But I'm going to go with the 1.5. You never know when you're going to need that extra little bit of buffer room, especially in a series like this where both teams just have that habit that they can never kick of making these games nail biters. We also do get this at minus 105, which is a nice little added boost. So it's nice that we can take those when we can get them with a pick that we are confident with. But numbers aside, I just think it's time to fade this from a Quad City standpoint. Like I said, Green Bay's an especially good home team. They're definitely well above Fishers as far as power rankings go. And they're going to be hungry after only putting up 30 points in Tulsa last week. I think they get back to their offensive ways, knowing that that is probably going to have to be the path that they take to beat the Steamwheelers. And going back to that last meeting, which was the season opener in week 1, the Blizzard only lost by 2 in Moline. So this isn't totally out of the realm of possibility for the Blizzard to pull off. And all we need from them, if they don't happen to win, they could lose by 1, and this bet would still cash. So give me this underdog spread bet at minus 105 with Green Bay putting an end to Quad City's perfection on the money line and spread. Once that game gets all said and done, we will be pretty much set for the evening window of games, of which we have 4. The 8:05 game down in Tulsa sees the Barnstormers continuing their road trip with the date against Tulsa, favored by 6.5. The over-under at 81.5. Iowa plus 170 and Tulsa minus 205 for the outright wins, respectively. Well, these two teams had clearly opposite results last week. Tulsa's 16-point victory over Green Bay. And on the other side, Iowa crashing back down to earth, losing by 31 to a Sharks team that was on a 2-game losing streak, starting to have a little bit of doubt settle in. But yeah, the Barnstormers obviously desperate for wins to try to keep some sort of hope alive in their hopes to steal a playoff spot from that Eastern Conference. If there's any silver lining to them, aside from last week's letdown, the offense has put up numbers. It's been well known that Iowa wants to employ a pass-heavy attack, and to their credit, they've done pretty well, even though the plan is a bit somewhat predictable. I think James Cahoon has a bounce-back game here. He tried to play a little bit of hero ball based on the eye test last week. I think he gets back down to going with smarter decisions, knowing when to tuck it and run, knowing when to check it down. But yeah, this one, to me, it comes down to Tulsa just playing their best football of the season right now. TJ Edwards in the offense, completely firing. The defense getting stops and takeaways to help fuel that. So I'm going to go back to a bet that has been fairly reliable in the early stretch of the season and was definitely a beacon of consistency last year. And that is the over at 81.5. When I had done my way too early predictions over on my X account, I thought this was going to be somewhere around the mid 80s. So the fact that we're getting it here at 81.5 presents exceptional value, particularly in the light of Iowa has given up 50 plus points in every game except for one, which was their win over Fishers a couple weeks ago. So your confidence in this bet ultimately comes down to whether or not you think Iowa's going to score 31 plus points. And for a team that averages around 42, 43 per game, that's not going to be an unreasonably tough task. Worst case scenario, if it comes down to one of those classic Iowa garbage time drives that winds up as a touchdown to push us over, so be it. But I think this is a perfect matchup for TJ Edwards, Hassan Rogers, and his gang of Oilers to keep the hot streak going here. So that is my play. I foresee Iowa and Tulsa breaking the 81.5 barrier. We have 3 9:05 kickoff times. Those are Eastern, by the way. Let's talk first about the Massachusetts Pirates coming off their bye week, heading to Arizona for their first of 2 games in the state here over the next couple weeks. Their opponent tomorrow will be the Tucson Sugar Skulls, who are getting 1.5 from the Pirates, the over-under at 78.5. The Pirates minus 125 money line and Tucson plus 105. This is the debut of head coach Tom Menas, who was hired by the Pirates as the head coach / defensive coordinator during the bye week. So that marks the second bye week that the Pirates have added a coordinator or main coach of some capacity after hiring Martino Theus to be the offensive coordinator during the team's week 3 bye. So they've kind of been retooling that coaching staff on the fly. But if their past 3 games were any indication of success that may have had after an 0-2 start, looks pretty good for them. They still have some things to figure out. A lot of talent on that roster, but have really yet to see anybody emerge that's like, holy cow, this kid is frightening. But they're still going to be a tough out in any game nonetheless, especially for a Tucson team that's coming off a high, rallying for the final 22 points of their game against Arizona last week to get the win. So they are definitely more than capable of hanging around with some of the best teams in the league, especially at Tucson Events Center. This is where offenses have gone to die. We've seen it with Jacksonville this year. We have seen it with Arizona this year. And I believe Northern Arizona's had a game there. Maybe not, but in any event, folks who have read my piece over at the forum already know where this bet is going. It's a bold bet, but it's one where the numbers back this up with about as much confidence as you can get. The under at 78.5 is scary. We're going to have opportunities for big chunk plays, maybe busted coverages, and we always have the threat of special teams and short fields kind of spoiling the fun as far as these bets go. But if there's any game where you could justify going with the low on this total, it's between two teams that are 16-5 to the under in Tucson, dating back to last year, and the Pirates 14-7 to the under. Those are just stupidly efficient rates at cashing that bet where I have to bite. I just have to. I think as long as neither team eclipses 40, this should be a reasonably safe bet. The Pirates offense, it has some pieces in place, but they like to run the ball and kind of wear out defenses over the long run. And Tucson, much of the same. They do have some explosiveness with Jorge Reyna and Trip Harrington. We saw that play out in the fourth quarter last week. But for the most part, they're very much run game inclined too. So I'm expecting a low scoring affair here. Mass and Tucson under 78.5. Keep their red hot under trends moving along. Other 9:05 game, perhaps the projected game of the week, Bay Area at Arizona. Two teams at 4-1 to top the Western Conference. The winner will have the lone seat on top. This is a straight pick'em, no favorite or underdog, technically. The game's over-under set at 86.5. My gosh, is this game going to be fun. All of these Panthers-Rattlers games seem to fall under that designation. You have Josh Jones versus Dalton Sneed. You got Rob Keefe versus Kevin Guy. And two teams that really do not like each other. Yet somehow in some way, even though they by and large have been the best two teams in the conference for the past 2+ years now, they still haven't met in the playoffs. Which is a little bit wacky, but maybe that changes this year, maybe not, who knows. But in any event, for this game, Bay Area comes in absolutely unconscious. They've won each of their past 4 games by a minimum of 16 points. Whereas Arizona obviously is coming off that heartbreaking loss in Tucson last week. This is another one of those coin flip games. I honestly spent like 10, 15 minutes going back and forth with myself on what I wanted to do here. My end decision is probably going to shock the heck out of viewers out there. A Bay Area over. Alec, are you serious? Are you overreacting to getting burned by this in each of the past 2 weeks? No, I am not. Here is why. There comes a point in time where you do have to consider specific matchups when analyzing these lines. And one thing that I looked at with Bay Area and Arizona in their series dating back to 2023 is that all 4 of those matchups have made it by this total. And the two matchups in that stretch that took place in the Snake Pit saw 133 and 120 points scored. Basic translation here, when these two teams meet, it is offensive fireworks. Both teams that just want to go at each other's throats and assert themselves as the team to beat out west, which is a pretty big deal. So this is not me suddenly ditching the well that has treated me to a bunch of wins in the recent and somewhat distant pasts, but the numbers just make way too much sense here. Arizona, the top scoring team in the league at 50 plus per game. Bay Area rounding out the top four with over 45 per game. If we make these averages, we're at this total. So here's to hoping for some high-flying offense as Bay Area and Arizona look to make a bid to make it 5 for 5 to get over that 86.5 mark. All right, and wrapping up the 9 o'clock Saturday window, we have the San Antonio Gunslingers, the other team coming off a bye this week, doing battle with the Vegas Nighthawks, which for them is the second consecutive time. The Nighthawks are giving 4.5 with the over-under set at 79.5. The Gunslingers are plus 150 money line, and the Nighthawks are minus 180. For the Gunslingers, this is a must-have game. Simply put, they have to win it. I don't think they can drop to 1-5 and make any sort of push at getting to the playoffs. And winning this one is going to be tough, especially against a Nighthawk team coming back home and working on 2 consecutive wins. Again, that quarterback situation in Vegas remains a little bit of a mystery. Jaden DeLaura started the first half, but Jerome Johnson came in relief midway through and finished that win off. So it remains to be seen who exactly is the starter here. But I think whoever it is, we could get a very similar script to what we saw with this matchup a couple weeks ago over at Freeman Coliseum, where both teams prioritized the run game. There was very little in the way of passing attempts, though both teams did show some efficiency airing out the ball in varying capacities. But yeah, this is an interesting game for me to pick. I was tempted to go Gunslingers with that spread at plus 4.5 or beyond that key number of a field goal. But I ended up having second thoughts on that. I'm sorry to the Gunslingers fans out there, but my direction on this one's a little bit different. I'm going the under. A second under this week where the total is set below 80. It's crazy, but again, it's one of those situations where it makes at least a lick of sense. In that aforementioned matchup a couple weeks ago, we had a 35-28 Vegas decision in an outing where possessions were extremely limited as both teams prioritized that ball control. It came out to, I believe, 8 possessions apiece, where on average, a team will typically get at least 10 possessions per game. So there is that little bit of regression of the mean to worry about as it pertains to this game. But the other thing to consider too is that San Antonio, if you look beyond their 55-point game that they had against Arizona a while back, their maximum scoring output has been 31. And Vegas's average is hovering right around the 35 mark on a per game basis. So two teams whose offenses are still trying to figure out what their identity is and how to build upon it. So I'm suspecting we could get another similarly low scoring affair. I mean, even the game with the Wranglers last week, it did technically make it over this number, but it was by the hook in that 43-37 Nighthawk win. So let's keep the ground games rolling here. Milk as much time off the clock as we can. And see Gunslingers and Nighthawks stay below 79.5. And our Sunday game to close out the week. We're trying to snap a 3-bet losing streak on games played on Sundays here at Wager Wednesday. The Wranglers and Strike Force will present us with that opportunity. At Front Wave Arena, the Strike Force are giving 10 in the hook, over under 81.5. On the money line, Northern Arizona is plus 260 and San Diego is minus 325. Last week was probably the best game of the season for the Northern Arizona Wranglers. It was their smallest margin of defeat. The offense looked reasonably good, and the defense had some solid takeaways. So there was a lot to build on within that 60-minute sample. Does it translate to a win here on the road against a Strike Force team that's kind of reeling after a loss to the Bay Area Panthers, which snapped a 2-game winning streak for them? It's a very interesting call. There's a bunch of worthwhile bets here on this board. But for those who have been paying attention, we haven't done our money line bet yet. This is the game where it's going to happen. I put my faith and perhaps my curse on the San Diego Strike Force this week, laying minus 325, which is positively disgusting. But listen, we're 0-7 on moneyline favorite betting. Eventually, one of these is going to have to go our way. To put it simply, Nate Davis and that San Diego Strike Force attack cannot afford to have a subpar outing in this one, especially in the context of the Western Conference playoff race. This road matchup against Northern Arizona simply has to be a win. It has to be. That's not to say that Northern Arizona cannot win the game, especially if they can get off to one of those crazy starts to kind of complicate things a little bit. But it's tough for me to back them right now. Plus 10.5, I will admit, is not too shabby. This was the spread that the Wranglers were able to cover last week in Vegas. So we'll have to see how this goes. I'm banking on a bounce-back effort from the Strike Force in all phases of the game after things kind of fell apart on them last week. So give me the Strike Force with an outright victory over the Wranglers to try to close out that week on a positive note, something that we have struggled with this season. All right, so we have covered all 6 games on the Week 8 docket. Now let's find out what our 3-leg parlay of the week is. So with this one, I started with Quad City and Green Bay. And despite these two teams boasting 2 very powerful offenses, I'm taking the under here at 85.5. And this was another pick where I leaned upon series history a little bit in backing my decision. And what I found upon closer review of this series, particularly from 2023 onwards, when betting information was able to be tracked, all time, Quad City versus Green Bay, 6-2 to the under, if you could believe it. With the average score in those contests, just about 80 points a game. I think when I was reading Angie's game recap earlier this week from the Week 1 meeting, she worded it so well where she said something along the lines of, these two teams just have that habit of playing in nail biters, like dragging each other through the mud, always winding up as a 1-possession game somehow in some way, regardless of how the teams are doing entering in. These games are just evenly matched classics. But on that note, I do bank on the defense is doing at least enough to ensure that this bet makes its way through. We are over that 12 touchdown number, and we are at an 85.5 total where, as we saw earlier in the reflection piece, when set at a number greater than 82.5, unders have cashed about 70% of the time. So we will bank that trend to get our parlay started. Serving as the middle piece of this treble, I have Bay Area outright. I had debated between including this as my leg or that over 86.5 as the second leg, and I ended up going this way with it. There's very few teams that have played the Wranglers as well as the Bay Area Panthers have. 3-1 to be exact, going back to the 2023 season. And that stretch included last year a convincing win 68-52 in the Snake Pit by the California Cats. And honestly, how can you go against Bay Area right now with how incredibly robust that they've been playing? Granted, those opponents that they faced, maybe not quite the caliber that Arizona is, particularly with this being a road game. But this is a team with championship pedigree and all the momentum in the world right now. So it's a roll of the dice, but hey, these parlays are inherently rolls of the dice anyway. So give me the Panthers on the second leg, which keys us in on our third and final leg, which we will put on Sunday's game. And I'm going to go with the lower half of the total in Wranglers and Strikeforce. Again, this banks back to the idea of the Strikeforce getting a redemptive game out of really all of their team in general, but particularly the defense, which we've seen. They can take away the ball at will when things are going right for them. And Caleb Lowe, while he was impressive in the Vegas game, leading Arizona to heights that they haven't been at yet this season, let's see what he does in a follow-up act on the road against this Strikeforce defense. The Wranglers, by the way, 5-0 to the under. Does that mean that high-scoring game is overdue? Or does it mean that Northern Arizona struggles on offense again, and this winds up being like a 38-28 sort of game? Who knows? But I'm going to bank on that under streak to continue. We have had incredible success betting on Wranglers games in general on the season. So this seems like a solid way to close out my three-legger. So for those following along at home, I'll recap it again. Our Saturday afternoon pick is Quad City Green Bay under 85.5. Saturday evening, the Bay Area Panthers to send the Wranglers to a second consecutive loss. And Sunday's game of Northern Arizona San Diego to stay under 81.5. Each of the three legs are at minus 110, so we get the same plus 595 payout potential that we had last week, which means a $10 wager could potentially turn into just a few cents short of $70. So that is where my picks lie for this week. As action kicks off tomorrow afternoon with that Quad City Green Bay tilt. So that is going to do it for tonight's edition of Wager Wednesday. You can catch all the action over at IFL Network. The link for that is also in the description. If you haven't signed up for an account yet, definitely do so. You get a 7-day free trial after you put your information in. So you can test things out this week if it's something that you like. You can consider the monthly or the yearly plan if it's something that maybe not be tailored for you. It comes at absolutely no cost. So definitely check that out, especially if you have skin in the game. So for those of you that do, I wish you the very best of luck. I will see you at the cashier.